Hello, everybody. This is Millennial Mike again, and decided to kind of put something together here. It's been a minute since I've made, I guess you could say, some original content. I've been really thinking about what it is that I want to do in this whole situation with the health crisis and all of that recently has put me in a weird situation where, you know, it's funny because think having more time would give you the incentive to do things that you would have done or wouldn't that you would do if you had the time to do it. That's I guess that's always the excuse is, oh, I don't have the time. And then you have unlimited time and it seems like it doesn't get done. And there's other factors too. I feel like sometimes when you have a schedule, a curriculum, it makes me more productive. I feel like having a goal, okay, I need to get from A to B this time in the morning, and then I need to get this done, when I get to this spot, and this done when I get to this spot. It's been programmed into me so that way when I do things that way, it just gives me more like a goal, when I'm coupling getting a job done with being somewhere or getting somewhere. And things have been strange recently, having worked from home for a little bit, for about 6 months. During that time, creating content, you do it in front of your computer. And it's something that I enjoy doing, but it's also a task. It comes with its difficulties and its struggles, and it does take a level of patience to do that. But a day for me would be like, you wake up in the morning, you work for 8-9 hours in front of your computer, and in front of the same computer or at the same desk, now it's time to do my hobby, which is podcasting or, content creating or something like that. And even though they're different things, there's something psychologically that, it's like the same thing. And it's like, and you want to take a break for it. You want to go somewhere else. You want to be somewhere else. You want to be in a different environment. And unfortunately, that has taken a toll on my ability, or rather my desire to create the content that I enjoy doing. And so no, it's not really an excuse, but I always think it's important to learn about yourself. And I think confronting that it's the first step, It's only the first step. Some people go their entire lives only making the first step or making, tons of first steps. So that's not an excuse either. But, the only real statement is just to do it, is just to do anything. It seems like there is no statements, you're just doing. So I'm not trying to make excuses. And I guess in that vein of thought, in that line of thought, that's why I'm here today. But kind of, I guess, in keeping with what the discussion was about, why I'm here, is recently, and you guys may have known this if you've seen other content that I've done, is that a big part of my online engagement and interaction has been tied to the Snyder Cut movement. Long story short, there's a movie called Justice League, a licensed product from, DC Comics, made into a movie, helmed by director Zack Snyder, who, due to unfortunate family circumstances, had to be removed, or he stepped down. And amongst that, there was conflict, and there was, a scandal ensued. And the events led to what we know as 2017's Justice League, directed by Joss Whedon. And I'm not really here so much to talk about all the details of that. I mean, there's so many great videos on YouTube and essays and things like that from passionate people many of which I know, that I would be glad and would love to recommend to you. So that way, if you want to know more about that, if you desire to know more about that, you can look into it. You know, it is a movie. It's a blockbuster movie, a comic book movie. And I know there's a lot of people out there who aren't interested in those things just on its own merit. So all the details, even though it's an interesting story, might not interest you because it's just not the kind of subject you're interested in talking about today, or listening to. But what I wanted to talk about was actually something kind of tangential to that. Recently, and I personally, I will probably go into maybe some more of the specifics with other people doing like a stream or something like that. I do want to get more into this kind of discussion. But specifically, what I want to talk about today was about fandom and some of my thoughts about fandom. I think that there has been a very interesting culture developing around fandom that has caused me to have some ideas about it that I didn't think I would have, because, if this thing didn't happen. So, recently I was talking about how, a lot of my interaction with online, discussion and discourse forum has been in regards to the Snyder Cut movement, if you will. That same movement has kind of caused or created a spark, a shift in the culture of fandom that I think that, it could develop into something greater. And I think a lot of us have been very interested in it. There's always been this idea, or I don't really know. I can't honestly say I know how long this idea has been going on, but there's been this idea for a while of the fandom versus the creator, or the creator versus the fan. Creatives versus the audience, the suppliers versus the demanders, if you will. And that there's this war on fandom, which I believe in. And we can maybe talk a little bit about that. We've seen with particularly a lot of larger properties like Star Wars and, in the actual comic book space, with movies, with video games, any kind of escapist material, really. There's been the situation where creators have been very antagonistic almost of their consumers. And I don't want to be disingenuous and say that it's really all consumers. It's really hard to say, are the consumers that are the loudest, that are like me, who just choose to plug their microphone in, their Yeti microphone into their laptop and start talking and posting it on YouTube, are they the ones who represent fandom? Do they deserve to? Do I deserve to? I don't know. And, who can speak for anyone else? When it comes to other situations, I don't believe I can speak for anyone else but myself. And I think that it also comes to fandom as well. But that's not how reality works. You can, in fact, speak for other people, whether they like it or not. And that's kind of where some of the discussion is also going to go into a little bit. But kind of more on this war on fandom, I've been thinking about how much of an issue it actually is. And by thinking about it, I'm not saying that it is not an issue at all, I'm not saying that it's the biggest issue in entertainment and, either. But I guess the issue It's always been more of a consumerist, corporatist kind of, maybe even capitalist kind of discussion or situation with around content. It's really just a content discussion. And ultimately, what makes money is what's going to get made. At least that's what I've been taught. It's reasonable enough to believe that. Although to think that there are no other factors involved, I think anyone would be remiss to try to dismiss that. But that is what I still think to a degree that does still matter. Even though it sometimes seems as though these companies who are very successful, very successful, sometimes choose to do things that aren't obviously lucrative. And, and then you're just thinking, okay, why is that? And, what decisions could they have made to be more lucrative, regardless of how I feel about the particular decision? They killed Luke Skywalker and they did this to him and they disrespected him, or they did this to Joel in Last of Us, or da 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 da. And obviously, the way you feel is going to have an effect on whether you think what they were doing, is smart. I see so many people on YouTube saying things like, "Oh, they should know better. This is not what their fans want. This is not, and it's and it comes off very disingenuous because, and also I do want to put this out there that I hear a lot of this is because I subscribe to a lot of this. A lot of the people that say these things and have a strong voice in regards to this whole idea of the war on fandom. I subscribe to a lot of it. I listen to it because I like it and it appeals to me. It tickles my my fancy. It appeals to my sensibilities. But I'm trying to be critical of that and see maybe if there's something else going on. So I just wanted to kind of just qualify that. But how much how are we really supposed to tell, like what, as a consumer, so it's supposed to go both ways, right? If it's supposed to be believed that supply and demand, money, is provided, product comes. They're making a lot of money anyway, especially with these big properties. It's almost guaranteed to make a lot of money. So at what point do you distinguish a lot of money from a lot of money? And and that gets into economics and business and whatnot. And you can only make, I guess, these assumptions, especially when a lot of the core decision making is not for us to know. We can only see and hear how things are interpreted to us through the media and things like that. So, it just now I do think that despite all that, all the information that we can look at and claim, well, hey, they're doing things that, there must be a war in fandom because the decision that they make aren't always in favor of the most vocal, the people who spend the most amount of money or who claim to do so. But I still believe there is a war on fandom because of the way that the rhetoric that comes from people who are directly related to the creators, the actors, the directors, the advertisers, marketers, and the media who are owned by the companies, the same companies who create the content. We've seen time and time again how these companies often speak in behalf of them, and how a lot of times they'll be the ones to release information, press releases on new content coming out. It's so it's so synchronous that it's like, okay, it's clear that these are the trades they're using to release this information. They make the deals to say, hey, here, you take this, you know, frame it this way. And it's also clear that they use the trades as well to push narratives and to control public thought on certain properties and things like that. But the rhetoric that comes from a lot of these people can sometimes be very antagonistic, hateful even toward not just individual fans or, oh, this person or this group of people said this or that, but rather, the idea of a fan in general. Especially when they start talking about how fans are entitled. And if you are to believe that it's a supply and demand thing, I mean, with any business, you give money, there is a degree. Now, the degree itself of entitlement that you believe that you have is, a little obfuscated, especially when it comes to ideas, and not just products. It's a little different. With something that's more like, food or something like that, the ideas of quality are a little bit more widely understood, but with, fiction and these forms of content, it's a little bit different. So that's why I'm saying is, the idea of fans seems to be, creators seem to be so, they seem to really chafe the idea of the entitled fan. And, and it seems to be growing, and even to the point where content seems to be almost spiteful in a certain way of the fan, especially when you have these franchises where fans, the audience and the creators know the expectations, and the creators, the content seems to be made in such a way to where it's very spiteful toward that expectation. And I think there's a certain meta where it's like, hey, we understand, know the rules before you break it. Maybe some of this can be chalked up to just a misunderstanding of storytelling or franchise storytelling, to be specific. That's a possibility too. I can't claim to know. But with these things that I mentioned, these are the reasons why I tend to believe that there is a war on fandom. So I wanted to talk a little bit about that. And then the thing that I really wanted to talk about was the war of fandom and how events that are taking place right now may change the way that fandom gets along with itself. So, for instance, the Snyder Cut movement was a highly successful movement. It's a very dedicated movement. So to say that it was just some loud people, shouting and getting what they want is an understatement, but it's a very dedicated movement that would have continued to push for years to come. They would have continued. It wouldn't have stopped. And I think that's the reason why we are seeing what we're seeing now, is because they knew that they weren't going to stop. They weren't going to be silenced. But because of the Snyder Cut movement and the success that it has brought, I started to think about, okay, let's say that fandom is catered to, right? Um, and then I also want to talk a little bit about how I don't think that the Snyder Cut movement is a uh, is a fandom, and I'll get into I'll specify exactly what I mean here soon, but I do want to mention that as well. But let's say that fandom in general starts to become more accepted, and that the fans start to navigate their own narrative more. I think that something that a lot of people within fandom don't understand is what that means for them individually, because fandom is a very collectivist idea. And I've seen firsthand how people within the movement, within the community, have chafed at people who have taken the power of fandom to its logical conclusion, right? Handing over the power, the MacGuffin, if you will, to the collective that is the fandom allows for the fans on an individual basis to fight to the top, to push to the top, through whatever means is necessary. And that clearly means that some fans are going to still remain at the bottom. There's a power disparity there. There's gatekeeping that takes place, and people aren't always going to be happy with the people who have the control of the narrative. That's the issue that we have right now with the creators. We don't like the fact that the creators, have control of the narrative, and it's going in a different direction than what they expected. But what happens when the fandom has control of the narrative and part of it doesn't agree with the rest? Who's to say who's a fan and who isn't? And who's to say, ultimately who says it is whoever takes control, whoever takes it, that's who it is. I'm a fan if I say that I am, and if I take control of my own of the narrative, create a platform and go about it that way, I have the power. You take it. Not everyone, there's no such thing as some holistic thing where everyone is democratically going to be able to move the narrative of the fandom. It's like, no, it's like the majority rules. The general thrust is whoever is at the top of the fandom. That's why you have these gatekeepers in the Snyder Cut fandom and many other fandoms. It's not just them, but it's most pronounced because they're successful. It's funny because fans can unite against the creators, the suppliers, if you will, if they aren't meeting the majority of the interests of the fans. But when the fans have it, then then it's different. It's a little bit messier. And and then you could still blame the suppliers, like, oh, you cater to these fans, or you cater to these fans over here. These ones aren't sincere, but these ones are. These ones did all the, they bought all the product. They spent all their money, their time and effort. These are the ones who deserve, your attention and promotion. And it's a complicated issue that I don't claim to have the answer to. But I do think that the discussion is not being had, The things that I do have to say about it are basically this. I mean, I've talked quite a bit at length here, but from what I now believe after my experiences is that fandom isn't any better than the creators. It's not, because fandom is composed of people that share the same innate positive and negative qualities that make up the creators. The only thing that doesn't, I guess, isn't within fandom as is with the creators is the element of money. Like the horse isn't in the race for the fandom as far as money is concerned, but money, in my personal opinion, and I'm sure this can be refuted, I know that it will be, is a means to power. And that is what really everyone wants. There's the power to enact their will. So ultimately, I think it's all equal. The fans want the power. The companies want the power. And they go about it different ways, but ultimately you can do the same underhanded and treacherous things to get it. And I think that we're just going to be seeing a shift in power from people willing to do anything to get it and throw anyone under the bus to get it, to people who are willing to do anything to get it and throw anyone under the bus to get it. And it's going to be a real shocker when all these fandoms, from the Snyder Cut fandom to Star Wars to, whoever, realize that the same kinds of underhanded tactics work regardless of who holds the key. You can't just get things by sitting back, whining and complaining about it. And this isn't also, I want to say this is not to undermine people who've been wronged in some kind of way. But it's really just I desire to look at the reality of the situation. I've been affected in negative ways by the way that the companies, handle the properties that I care about, as well as how fans that I don't typically like or agree with handle the properties and characters and stories that I love either. But I've just come to realize that, once step one is done and bringing the power to the people, then now we have to deal with the people. I just realized that. And, it's ultimately not going to make, everyone happy. So that's what I've learned. I don't actually think it's going to really be any better. You're still going to have to exert your will. And I know a lot of people, and once again, this is not directed toward anyone, but there's a lot of people who aren't willing to go as far as they need to get what it is that they claim to want, in regards to, entertainment industry, and fans to spend the money, not that each individual is going to make all of the difference, but, there's a lot of people who have a lot to say and they don't do a lot, and that's really up to every individual. But, it gets complicated, it gets hairy, and the ideas that they're pretty nebulous, if you really get into it, if you get down to the core of the matter. I just think that maybe we should, start considering, like, okay, if it's a war on fandom and fandom takes the power, then, who takes the fandom? Then how are you going to deal with that? So anyway, maybe I'll make a video where I have more conclusive answers and I'm teaching you guys things. I'm telling you guys definitive truths. You know, hopefully I didn't waste your guys' time too much, and that you enjoyed listening to this 30-minute, pseudo rant. But I'm hoping, pretty soon to have to do like a stream with some friends of mine, and we can talk about this maybe more specifically as it pertains to the Snyder Cut fandom. Anyway, if you happen to stumble upon this video, please like, share, subscribe, comment. I'm planning on doing more discussion videos like this. Maybe I'll get a better camera and a little bit better setup in the future. I was obsessing over all these little details before I started filming this, and I'm like, you know what? Like I just need to do it, otherwise it'll never get done. So, hopefully the next one will be a little bit better quality. But the content is what matters, and I did want to get this out to you guys. So, for my sake, and hopefully you guys will enjoy as well. Anyway, this has been Millennial Mike. It's been great talking to all of you, and I'm out. Take care.